Shalom and welcome to Jewish Insights. I'm thrilled today to welcome the host of our newest weekly program on JBS, Being Jewish with Jonah Platt, which premieres Thursday evenings at 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. Eastern and then again Pacific. If you haven't seen it, it is must-see TV. Jonah explores Jewish identity with notable guests like Van Jones, Gail Simmons, David Lichtenstein, Skylar Aston, David Wolpe, and many more. We are super excited about this new program, which is entertaining, thoughtful, accessible, diverse, and as one viewer recently told me, it's actually really helpful. Jonah is a multi-talented actor and artist. I think my first experience, Jonah, of your talent was actually when we were both students at the University of Pennsylvania, watching you star in Penn's a cappella group Off the Beat.
That's right.
That's right. You did a Justin Timberlake, What Goes Around, Comes Around, right?
Nice.
That song?
Yeah.
I was Googling the other day, I'm like, oh, it's online. So you can find it on YouTube. It's amazing. You're Justin Timberlake, you crush it, man.
Thank you.
Really high level. You've done a couple things since then. You've acted in Oscar-nominated films like Being the Ricardos. You performed in Tony-winning musicals like Wicked. You've written for TV comedies, and very exciting, you're currently producing your first feature film, The Mensch, which you'll co-star alongside Ginnifer Goodwin. So we're very excited to see all of that. In addition to being an actor, an artist, and really a Renaissance man, Jonah has also emerged as a key voice in the Jewish community. Our producer Carol reminded me of this when she was telling me before that he joined his brothers Ben Platt and Henry Platt to sing the song Ahavat Olam during one of the many Zoom programs we all watched at home during COVID. That video has actually garnered over 2.5 million views on YouTube. And I actually remember where I was in the gym. We had a little gym with my kids and we watched that live and they were totally into it. So I have like the image in my brain of when that came on TV for us then. And really, both before and since October 7th, Jonah has established himself as a highly engaged advocate for the Jewish community. He uses his voice and his platform to empower, to educate, to explore issues affecting the Jewish community both at home and abroad. His words have appeared in Variety, the New York Post, LA Magazine, Jewish Journal, Hey Alma, Kveller, and The Wrap. I want to take one moment for Hakarat Tov and just say that I want to thank our mutual friend Tamar Moshe. So back in November of 2023, there was a Penn rally after the events that had happened there and what was going on campus, and we were trying to think of speakers who could kind of speak thoughtfully and engagingly and inspiringly, and she said, have you been following what Jonah's been doing? And I hadn't yet. I've been since. It didn't work out that day. You were in LA getting a haircut and weren't going to be in Philly the next morning, I remember. Haircut I hope went well.
He's great. He's Israeli, my guy.
There you go. That's what you need. But Tamar, we're always chatting. She's saying, when are you going to have Being Jewish with Jonah Platt? And we're having it.
Thanks, Tamar.
Yeah, Tamar, all the way. And really, I'll just say, I've said this many times in this program before, and if the goal of life, and I do think this is the goal of life, is to clarify what your gifts are and then use them to serve. Jonah, you're doing exactly that.
It's very generous. Thank you.
You got your gifts, you're using your gifts, you're doing good things with them. And so we are so thrilled to be carrying his new show, Being Jewish with Jonah Platt on JBS, and I'm so grateful to be sitting with you today.
Me too, Justin. I love being part of the JBS family and happy to be here with you today.
Our newest face, we're loving it. So there's so much to discuss. I think I want to just start with, I've known your family over 20 years at this point. I'll say my two memories on the Platt home, and then you can run ahead with those. But
great.
I was just thinking of a third, actually. I'll add all three. This was the summer of 2024, I think I was there. It was right before Wicked came out. And I remember actually your sister Samantha, my friend, having the CD of Wicked in the car. And of course that went on to become the smashing hit that your father, Mark Platt, produced. Yeah. But the two things that really stood out to me, I didn't know that at the time, I just loved the CD. The two things that stood out to me at the time that I remember there about the home was first, Ben and Henry putting on shows in the backyard.
That tracks.
That was an
everyday
quick
event.
Everyone, we got to sit in the backyard. They put this whole thing. Ben was bossing Henry around. They were putting on a show. That was like one thing I was like, this is so cute. I hope my kids like that they're doing stuff like that when the kids.
That was a constant, right? from when Samantha and I were kids all the way down to Ben and Henry, just shows in the backyard all the time.
The Von Platts, as they
exactly
say, right?
Right.
Exactly. And my second memory was hearing about, I think your dad had produced Legally Blonde a couple years before that, and hearing that they had Reese Witherspoon and her husband, then Ryan Phillippe at the time, for Shabbat dinner.
Yeah,
and just the image of like, what's it like to be, this family in LA that's making movies, making Broadway shows, being very successful, and again, using that platform to invite people into their home to have Shabbat dinner. So those are the two that stick out for me. But why don't you say a little bit about what it was like to grow up in your home and how that's influenced your journey?
I mean, in so many ways.
Yeah.
Growing up in my home, Jewishly, always a huge part of my identity. I mean, when I think, for me, like the one word I think of when I think Jewish, I think family. It's like the first thing I think about. Holidays together with cousins, with grandparents in LA, traveling to Baltimore, to Chicago, wherever it is, like every holiday with family. Going to Jewish day school with my siblings, with some cousins, like that was a big part of it. Again, felt like wrapped up in family and community. We did Shabbat every Friday. It wasn't, in high school, we started to be allowed to go out afterwards, but like all the way until I was in high school, it was just like Friday night, Shabbat dinner, that's it.
But I have to ask on that, is it true, I heard, maybe from Samantha, maybe from someone else, people have the custom on Friday night to bless their children to be like, Yosef's son, Ephraim and Menashe, or like the foremothers. But someone once told me that your father blesses people to be like Cal Ripken Jr. Is that a thing?
I don't remember that.
No?
If he did, it's
someone
definitely,
told me that it was in the list.
Maybe he did it like one time as a joke in front of somebody.
I love that when I heard that.
That's funny. They actually never did like the blessing to us, which I now do for my kids, because I was like, why did my parents do it for me? So now I do it for my kids. That's the one thing I'll ding them for. My cousins, who would have Shabbat with a lot, I only have one family of cousins in LA. Everyone else is spread all over the country.
You guys are north, south,
We're
east,
literally
west.
like every major city in the US, but I had one family, second cousins, and they would always bless their kids, and we had Shabbat with them a lot. And I remember being like, looking at my parents, like, hello, and I'm just watching my cousins bless their kids, and so now I do it.
Got it. All right, fine. So the rumors are mildly true, but keep going.
I thought it was super cool. That sounds like something he would do.
I've told other people that before.
I'm sure he did that. It just wasn't like an every Friday kind of thing.
For sure. Keep going.
And
camp, I assume, huge.
Camp was huge. You
guys were Ojai, big time.
Big time Ramah, Ojai. I mean, my mom and all her first cousins and siblings went, and then we went. So it's like a big multi-generation. Now my sister's kids go. So we've got 3 generations of Ramahniks. My sister Hannah worked at Ramah, as a professional for many years after being a counselor and all that. I think she's on the board now. Like tons of Ramah ties. My groomsmen and my wedding were all my Ramah buddies. Those are my best friends.
And in terms of shaping like the way you think about like growing up in this home, did that kind of like, first of all, was it pushing the direction of being an artist, and second of all, how was it making you think about how you have to like relate to the Jewish world? Let's say, because I feel like I'm projecting that maybe some of these seeds were planted early.
They were. I mean, there was never any like absolutely zero pressure to like pursue entertainment in any way. My parents were always very like, you should be doing what makes you happy.
Sure.
But we loved performing. I mean, it was like we were raised on. My parents met, part of the reason they came together was because they loved performing in musical theater and performing arts together.
I knew they met at Penn.
They met at Penn. My dad was in the Glee Club. My mom would sing. My dad directed her in a play in the Quad and Spring Fling. Yeah. So they both love music and musical theater and performing and all that stuff. So it was natural that when they had kids, like what did we watch? We watched their favorite musicals, and we listened to musicals in the car. So we just grew up all loving musical theater because my parents love it, and whatever your parents love, they pass on to you. So we always, as you said, we're doing shows in the backyard, we're doing after-school drama programs, but like you can see, like my sisters had zero desire to pursue any kind of career in the performing arts, and they're both very successful in what they do. And for me, it was just like being creative was always just what I love to do the most. And it's I appreciate what you said in your intro about sort of I've found a way to sort of use my gifts for good now. It's taken me like 37 years till this thing to sort of figure out one way to use all those gifts. I've sort of been trying to use this thing and then that thing and then this thing. I've always pursued all these different creative enterprises. My without sounding too like arrogant, like with my blessing and my curses, I'm good at a lot of stuff.
Sure.
So and so many times I wish I wasn't. I wish I was like really great at one thing and I could just be doing that one thing. But I was at sort of all these different things I could do well. So I would, if this wasn't working out, I could try this, and this wasn't working out, I could try that. So, even getting into entertainment, when I came out of college, it was like, I'm going to be a TV writer. It wasn't I was going to be an actor. So I tried to do that for a while, and then I started doing acting stuff, and just other things have snowballed. So that was never really pushed on me, but obviously a major influence. And then in terms of like living Jewishly, it was just so, and I mean this in a good way, taken for granted. I mean, it's just like such an innate day one part of my personality. My family, my parents, my aunts and uncles, my grandparents, all involved as leaders in their Jewish communities. So not just it's important to be Jewish, but I think each of my mom's siblings and her have all been presidents of their own local federations.
Right.
My grandparents were involved in federations. Even on my dad's side, like my aunts, they're involved in federations in their states.
Right.
So it's just always been in the water of like being a leader, being a part of the community, uplifting Jewish people. And you don't I didn't think about that too much as a kid. It wasn't like, if you would have guessed which of the 5 siblings would be the one ending up doing the Being Jewish show, it wouldn't have been me.
Right.
But it's clearly was all in there. And I'm grateful for that modeling. And through osmosis, it's just like always been percolating as something that's natural and important to do.
Beautiful. I'm noticing as you say that, right? Remind me, Will and Ted's mom?
Amy
Bressman, right?
My mom's sister Amy, president of UJA in New York.
Right. When your mom did LA Federation also, right?
They were at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
New York and LA too. That's amazing. That's crazy. And then, and now your mom doing JFNA and also chairwoman of JFNA. Mazal Tov to her also. She's an amazing woman. I've known her many years. Indeed. Very, very a treasure in the Jewish world. Your father as well. Your whole family. It's really a very special gift to the Jewish people. But Mazal Tov to your mom on her big award.
Yeah.
What's it? I
don't know what it's called. It's Israel is giving these.
The President's Medal of Honor. I have in my notes.
Israeli President's Medal of Honor. I think it's inaugural.
President
right?
Herzog. Yeah, it's very special.
Very special. We're very
and
proud.
Reflects that. That creates a whole model. Like you're right. It's in the water. You have all these adults around you that are kind of like using their skills, as we discussed at the beginning, to try to serve the Jewish people, heroically and passionately. So I guess it's some sort of inspiration, but you represent a whole different approach, right?
Yeah.
There's a time where it's about chairing federations and leading these national causes, and you're kind of like doing more of a social media influencer, grassroots experience. Talk to me about how you kind of ended up down that path.
Yeah, it came out pretty organically, as anyone who's a successful online presence it's organic. No one says, I'm going to become a famous influencer.
Yeah.
It's like you start doing something that matters to you and it catches on. So in spring of 2021 is when I really started doing advocacy for the Jewish community online. There was violence between Gaza and Israel in that spring, around like the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, all that stuff. And that was the first time I felt like, okay, I have an understanding of what's going on here, and I'm seeing online so many people have no idea what's happening. They're confused.
Yeah.
It needs some framing. It's just some like a filter to say in regular words, okay, here's what's up.
Right.
So I started doing that then, and I already had a little bit of a platform, smaller, but because of my entertainment stuff, and I had already done Wicked and all that. So I started it from there very slowly, a post here, a video there. Mostly was still like personal and entertainment-y stuff.
Sure.
And it just sort of grew organically. And then sort of one of my missions became like Jewish empowerment and celebrating Judaism. I saw that was sort of missing. So I started to do a little bit more of that kind of stuff. The next sort of big jumping point in my trajectory was I went to Israel in April of 2023 for a lab with the Tel Aviv Institute, run by a guy named Chen Mazig.
Sure, a friend of mine.
Yeah, he's great. I think he's actually in New York right now. He's terrific. And that was a really inspiring trip for me, because I was in this room with, 20 Jews from all over the world. I mean, we got a German Jew, Israeli Jews, a woman from Rwanda, just all these from France, so many cool people. All of them Jewish and like doing different things, not using their platforms necessarily to even talk at all about being Jewish. But I was just inspired by seeing all these people who are, making an impact in whatever space they're in. Sure. And it made me, when I came home, I was like, I want to be doing more. I feel like I can put more time into this and make more of an impact. So I started doing even more stuff. I did like a co-post with them on Father's Day of like what it means to be a Jewish father on Father's Day, stuff like that. Because I feel like just showing that stuff and putting it out there and like normalizing talking about that stuff and celebrating your Judaism is sadly, missing from a lot of what we see in the culture and online.
Sure.
And so to me, that's a big part of the mission too. And a big part of why I have the podcast really is just to sort of normalize doing this stuff and sort of lead by example in that way. And then the third big jumping off point was October 7th, which really poured gasoline on the fire of my advocacy. Certainly no shortage of things to explain and to educate people about and to talk about. But actually, now that I'm thinking about, like, even pre-October 7th, like I had done these big videos about like Jews are not white and Jews are not just a religion.
Right.
Like sort of these key touchstone misunderstandings that I think are at the root of so much of the anti-Jewish sentiment we get today, is because people don't understand that Jew does not equal white person, and that Jew is not just a person who like believes something about God that they can sort of pick up and put down. It is like a people. It's a ethnicity. So I was doing that before, and then October 7th happened, and it snowballed from there.
Beautiful. So I'm trying to think the best way to ask the following question, but I think, I'm someone who is very skeptical about online. I've certainly become more open since
there's a lot to be skeptical of.
At JBS. It feels like there's a lot of garbage there and a lot of misinformation there.
There is.
So first of all, it's heroic that you're even kind of trying to wade through that. A sibling of yours, I only mentioned once so far, Henry, wrote this amazing article. I remember reading it. It's got to also be 10, 15 years ago now.
About mental health?
Yeah, his freshman year at Penn, right? So the article, it broke my heart at the time. I remember my college roommates sending it around to me. I'm still close with my crew from 234 Beige Block, as they
love
say.
it.
That's our crew.
Remember well.
Yeah, exactly. And him kind of describing the first week at Penn where everyone's running to parties, and this idea that like everyone is taking selfies of the parties, and like, oh my God, I'm at the wrong party, look who's at that party, and me feeling like, holy cow, this is so terrible. Like I was just like meeting people and having fun, and if I had to look at my phone and find out what I'm missing all the time, how terrible it'd be. So I feel like there's kind of this like, node one we know is, and Jonathan Haidt, I don't know how you say his name, but has been writing about how it's creating anxiety among teens, all that kind of stuff.
My wife is sending me his videos constantly.
Keep the kids away from TikTok.
Oh yeah.
So we have node one, and then kind of node two, I would say, is this idea that like, in addition to the personal anxiety it creates around like, I'm missing out, or I don't look the way I should look, or all these challenges that come up, there's also like the second thing, which is the misinformation piece, right? Which is the, if you're in the correct echo chamber, even like talking to people around politics, like their view, everyone thinks that everyone is the same as them. It's like, wow, they're like, well, the whole world thinks this, and I'm like, no, your 5 friends think this, and because you liked one thing like that, everyone around you likes this. So I guess what I'm thinking about is like, when you think about having impact, and I know you're thoughtful about your impact, when you think about impact in the social media world, how do you think about, not before we get to politics, the question of the people being like, wow, not even you, but so-and-so is like Israel this week, or so-and-so is on a boat this week, or so-and-so, their family looks so happy, that whole like emotional element of the human Jonah. And then the second piece is like, how do you navigate trying to have impact when it feels like the algorithms are so hard against you, like, and you're trying to give some people information? 2-part question.
So in terms of the personal stuff, I actually, either on Threads or Twitter, I said something about this somewhat recently, that like, I feel very grateful that I'm of my generation and not slightly younger than me, because I grew up without social media. And like my formative years were not based around needing social media acceptance, like likes and clicks and who's at what part. Like that sounds horrible to me. And I really feel for these kids. It's really sort of a losing battle that they're in. It's the answer is to like get them off of social media and into the real world. So I don't feel that part so much, because I have perspective and I know what the difference is between real life and online life. And I like using social media to see what my friends are up to, and if they're like somewhere awesome, like this looks awesome, where's my invite? It doesn't make me feel, I'm happy in my own life.
Sure.
And then in terms of the other piece, I mean, what I try to do is sort of speaks to that. There's so much doom scrolling that happens. There's so much misinformation that happens. And so I try to be, the counterbalance to that stuff. Here is factual information. Something I really try not to do is tell people what to think.
Sure.
I really try to just put stuff out there, and then you're allowed to do with it what you want. Because I don't care what you do with it, in a certain way, and to a certain extent. Obviously, I care if you support terrorists or something.
Right.
But like talking politically, it's like what you decide to do in your own life that you think is best for your own family. It has no bearing on me, and you should be able to do that, and we can talk about this stuff. But it's important to me to have the information out there and to point out things that I think people are missing. Really trying to help people see reality. Instead of what we perceive to be true. I find like that gap to me is something I'm always looking at a lot. Like, what is something people are acting like is true and is so not true? And like, why are we pretending this is true? The thing that like pops into my head is, I'm a Democrat, but like Biden's mental state. It's like very clearly we can see like something's not right here, and then but the perception that's being put out is everything is fine. Like we know something's not fine. It's like let's call that out. So stuff like that.
Sure.
And again, I'll do it to any side. It doesn't matter. When something's not true, I want us to be saying, guys, let's get it together here. This is what's true.
Right. Beautiful. And I think one of the things that people makes you very appealing online as well is the sense that it's not, you're not one, not to put them down, but it's not the model of like hardcore advocacy of like, okay, here's the gotcha moment, or like, look how terrible this person is. It's not like extremism. It seems a little bit more like, let's have a conversation about this, or I'm noticing that there's a misconception here and I want to just walk you through it. So I think that's very powerful and very different.
For part of my goal is to, look, if the goal is to help people understand things and educate people, you can't be alienating people.
Right.
I want as many people consuming my content as possible so that they're getting this information and they're getting this new perspective. And if I'm too inflammatory, it's going to create like an echo chamber. It's going to alienate everybody who doesn't agree with that exact point of view. And we saw that a lot. I saw it a lot within the Jewish community around the election, where certain people on both sides were so narrow about it and so aggressive about it and so alienating to people within their own community who maybe had a different idea about it. And that's totally, to me, I don't get what the goal is there. The goal should be to be bringing people together and spreading clarity to all.
Right. Hopefully, from your mouth to God's ears, as they say. Because I think it's so commendable what you're doing. And I also, I hold the concern that sometimes it's so hard to do that well and to break through across walls, which I think you actually do much more than the average person. Chen does it as well, actually.
Yes, he does it really well.
So let's talk a little bit about the show. We spoke back in February of 2024, right? You reached out. You were
that
like,
was the first time? February.
Yeah.
Very early days.
I looked in my Facebook messages, right? And I was like, and I want to point that out, not just to tell the story, but really to give credit to you, because I think, you were clearly already thinking about this in February. You launched in October, right? So that's a 10-month span. And I've noticed, one thing I've known quickly about you is that you are meticulous in your prep time. Like, you put a lot of time into thinking about what's the show going to be. You put a lot of time into what individual episodes are. This was really not like a knee-jerk thing, let's do this. It was really like, I want to build this from the bottom up and do it well. And I think, to your credit, that's why it's being so successful. That's why all these news outlets are covering it, and you're getting tons of following on social media. Having gone through that, tell me, say it for us. Like, what do you what do you decide you're going for? Does it feel like you're doing what you're going for? Like, talk to me about the vision.
Yeah, I mean, I've touched on it a little bit so far, but like, I had a couple of goals, and I really do feel like I'm checking those boxes. I really wanted to, like, the core goal is to display the full spectrum of Jewish identity to people. Because as I said, the key misunderstandings about who Jews are and what they are is so fundamental, I think, to so much of the anti-Jewish sentiment that we have around the world. So just showing, look at all these different Jews and different ways to be Jewish in different fields and different levels of observance and different beliefs and, all that stuff, I think is so impactful. It's not just one kind of person that you maybe saw on TV or saw on the news, which is how most of the world interacts with Jews. Most people have never met a Jew, they don't see Jews, they don't know Jews. And if they do know Jews, a lot of them, I saw, this was another social media meme that I saw, it was good. It's like, if you haven't called to check in on your Jewish friend, you don't have a Jewish friend. Or no, if you don't understand why your Jewish friend is afraid, you don't have a Jewish friend, you know a Jewish person, which I thought was interesting.
Wow.
So I think that's a lot of people. They either don't know Jews at all, they don't know, Van Jones, who I just had on, he was like, a lot of black people don't even know their friends are Jewish. They have no idea that that's even a thing. So I want to get that knowledge out there. So that's just by having my guests on and me sort of talking about that stuff, I feel like we're accomplishing that. I wanted it to be super inclusive to all. So I very key from the beginning, have non-Jewish allies also on there. I know I have non-Jewish people in my audience. They reach out to me and gain a lot from this show, and that's so important to me because there are all kinds of good-hearted, well-meaning people who want this information, and they want to be on the right side of things. They want to understand things they haven't been exposed to. And the message of Judaism is such a positive one, and so they're getting to see that and experience that. So that was always key. And then I really wanted to showcase part of the diversity of the Jewish identity thing is making sure my guests are super diverse. So from really different fields, every episode should be 180 degrees from the person who was on before in gender, profession, race. Like I'm really trying to mix it up.
Sure.
And then lastly, as I mentioned, the leading by example thing, really just normalizing Jewish people talking about Jewish stuff, that they're not both rabbis, they don't have a PhD in Jewish studies, they're not from some institute. It's just people having conversations about their Jewish lives. It's the conversations you might have at home with your family, things you've been thinking about that now you're hearing this actor whose movies you love articulate, and you're like, oh my God, like I didn't even know this guy was Jewish, let alone is worried about anti-Jewish bigotry in his workplace like I am. And I know that's hitting people because I get a lot of, this show makes me feel less alone as a response, which is like the greatest thing to hear.
Beautiful. Let's stay on the Hollywood piece of it for a second, because I think, actually remember also 20 years ago, people kind of pointing out your family as like, and I'm not putting down Hollywood, it's a complicated place like anywhere else, but as the exception to the rule. The idea that they were this family that was very successful in Hollywood and also excited and confident in their Judaism and very involved with their temple and really wanted to have Reese and Ryan over for a Shabbat dinner and really do that engagement. And the typical, again, this is cliche, but the cliche is kind of like a lot of the Hollywood Judaism is a little bit like self-deprecating, self-hating. The stuff that comes out is not necessarily a positive reflection of Judaism. So how do you think about, first of all, what do you think is at the core of that? Why is that?
I think the core of that is fear. I think since the advent of Hollywood, all the Jewish founders all changed their names to sound less Jewish. I mean, it's always been about we're not Jewish, we're American, we're American. And I think that's at the heart of everything is acceptance, wanting to be assimilated, wanting to distance yourself from being Jewish. And that's why I think, a lot of the Jewish representation that we see, there's a lot of Jewish gatekeepers there allowing these things to happen. And it's because they don't want to stand up for being Jewish. They don't want to be seen as being Jewish. And the one thing I will say is since October 7th, as much as we've seen all these, especially celebrities in Hollywood being silent about it, I've seen in the business side of Hollywood a lot of people who have woken up, who are now galvanized and are like, I didn't realize we had such a huge problem here. Now we're having, anti-Semitism conferences at CAA, and we're having all these different meetings and initiatives, and we're making sure we have more authentic representation on things. So people are noticing, and there are a lot of committed Jews in Hollywood as well. They're just sadly not the majority. The majority is people who are either already disconnected from their Jewish identity and not really practicing, or afraid to be too stand out too much as a Jew.
Right. And have you found that in terms of getting guests on, are people more open to talking, the famous people, the actors and actresses in Hollywood?
I will say the only people that I've asked who have said no to me outright have been actors. Because there's one who was like, I hope you can understand that it's a very sensitive topic. And my response was, I don't think talking about who you are should be a sensitive topic. Right. And it's like, I'm not going to grill you on your Israel politics. If you're an actor, we're going to talk about your life and your Judaism, how those things intersect in what you do. We don't have to go into anything you don't want to go into. That's another key thing of my show. It's like, I'm not trying to, like you said, there's no gotcha moment. I'm not trying to trip people up or make them uncomfortable. Quite the opposite. Right. I want the most candid, open, honest, comfortable environment possible so we can get to real raw insights. I've had a lot of people cry in the interviews in my show that I don't know if they've all come out yet, but there's been a couple where people are crying because it's very real stuff that we're trying to get into. And
it's been blocked down for so long and they can't go public with. It's it's coming out almost.
So that's another thing. It's wanting to give people this space to do that. These celebrities, give them the opportunity. All they get to talk about is the thing that they do. Right. When you're at the press junket for your movie, they're not asking you about your Jewish upbringing. Right. But it's so core to these people's identity, and so I wanted to give them a space where they could talk about that stuff. I don't even remember how we got here, but that's
where that's fine. And then what about the other thing that made me think of when you were describing what has happened in Hollywood is Elliot Cosgrove, who is a friend of JBS, has been on many times. I remember him saying that for many years, the Jewish community tried to help Jews become more American, and now we realize it's time to help American Jews become more Jewish.
I like that.
You know, like we've been going in that direction, and it's interesting the way you framed it. That like there was kind of, I don't want to say obsession, but like this move towards let's be more American, let's be more American, let's be more American. That people kind of left their Judaism at the door, but now we've arrived at a place where everyone is bringing their identity to the door, and now it's like we have to like rediscover how to bring our Jewish identity.
I think that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Super interesting. Okay, fine. I want to ask about, one of the things that you've done very, very, I guess, you've pushed for is navigating difficult conversations, right? And also, I loved, one of your episodes, you opened by making the case for each presidential candidate, which is just a fascinating thing. And you didn't hide yourself, you said who you're voting for as part of that. But I think this idea that it's so rare that we see people that can try to like just put ourselves in two different chairs and think multiple sides about it. And you tell a story about meeting a woman at a bar who had different political views from you, and how you like managed to have a meaningful conversation. First of all, like, let's just start big picture. Is that, is that realistic, I guess, for lack of a better term? I know you've had this experience. It doesn't seem like it's happening anywhere.
Yeah.
To me, it feels like, and especially in the Jewish world, it used to be we fought over denominations. Like, if you have a mechitza and I don't, we can't talk. Now everyone's like, I don't care about your mechitza, but if you're voting this way and I don't, we can't talk. So, like, it's one thing to do that on TV, it's one thing to do that like talking at a camera, but like in your own life, how do you navigate that? Are there examples that you're comfortable sharing, or like how you walk through having close friends, family, coworkers who are very diverse from you politically? Okay,
so yes, of course I have people in my life who are diverse from me politically. I mean, and that's,
by the way, not of course. There are many people in communities where they're really.
Well, so maybe not of course, but I mean.
But no, I should just say that.
No, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
I have.
And maybe it reflects your personality also, that you're able to go between. But keep going. Sorry. So how do you think about it?
I mean, to me, politics or different ways of thinking about things, that should never come between a personal relationship. Mm-hmm. Certainly, I feel that way with random people, but certainly with someone you actually purport to care about. Mm-hmm. I don't know why something about like who you're voting for should be more important.
Sure.
And I say that with like such confidence now. I've certainly that was a learning thing for me too. I know a lot of people, the first instinct is, if you think this, you're putting me in danger. You're diametrically opposed to me. But I think we have to like move past that, and it's like we're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
So in my own life, like I have a friend group chat with, these are my boys from like elementary school, and we cover the spectrum politically. There are people who are like, here's this awesome thing Elon Musk said, and then the other guys are like, this guy's a tool. This is ridiculous. He's a great innovator, but he's dangerous. Yeah. And we go back and forth, and like it doesn't matter at all because we all respect each other, we love each other, and it's like. It's fun. It should be fun. Like I enjoy the intellectual banter and hearing what other people are thinking and considering it myself. I mean, you mentioned the two sides of the presidential thing. I try to do that with everything that I'm covering. Like, I don't know how you can make a strong argument for anything if you can't make the other side's argument for them. So anytime I'm coming to my own conclusion, I'm trying to make sure I understand as 360 a picture of it as possible, and then I can feel really confident because I know I've done the work, I've considered what I need to consider, and then I can be confident in my views. But I'm also equally humble about them, where if you prove me wrong with something I'm confident about, I'll go like, oh yeah, that's actually makes more sense than what I was thinking. And I think that's important too. We lose that a lot. It's another one of these perception reality things. Like, we didn't always used to be so polarized. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when your neighbor was Republican, you were Democrat, you talked about it, and then you went about your lives. That was, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And we sort of are behaving as if we don't have that option. Because it's been so normalized to just do the other thing, which is polarization.
Right.
But we can choose at any time to not play that game and just, see each other as people first, and then the other stuff is so much more surface.
It's beautiful. And I think, first of all, what you're describing has in some ways become a lost art. I think I like to think of myself in the same camp as you. And certainly when we think about JBS, we want people to see, like, over the course of a week of programming, someone on the right, someone on the left, someone Orthodox, someone Reform, really the different flavors. So we feel like that melting pot of different views is really what makes it a beautiful people. But I think that it's really, I think it's hard for people to, notice the stakes of what's at stake, and also be able to have a thoughtful conversation where they're curious to learn from others.
I think that's right. I think, look, emotions are powerful, and especially when it comes to fear or anger, those negative emotions are extremely powerful motivators for people. I think we saw that in the election, moving a lot of people to the right. Definitely comes from a place of fear, of whatever, of your bank account, of the border, of whatever it is. And so sometimes,
or a fear of extreme views being incorporated, let's say.
That too.
Yeah, on the left and the right.
Yes, for sure. So negative emotions are a very powerful motivator for people. And we as human beings, we're not all masters of our own being, where we can say, okay, I'm feeling that emotion, but I can recognize that and sort of set it aside and choose my higher human functioning in this moment. A lot of people just give into that emotion and it stops there. And I did one of the things on my podcast was the 4 C's of how to have a good conversation. And one of them was calm. It's you cannot engage with somebody if you're riled up, if you're afraid, if you're angry. It's over before you've even started. So it takes a little bit of practice, but it's a muscle we all have. As you said, sort of a lost art, but everyone can do it. You just have to set your mind to it.
Right. So 2 questions on that. One is, how much is the rise of social media making that less and less possible for people? This goes back to my question before, which is when you're feeding the beast and you're trying to shape the beast, but is the beast not shakeable? Despite what we do, is this creating a society where people can't have conversations?
Yes. The short answer is yes. It's definitely fueling the polarization, for sure. It fuels the echo chambers, your feed. I have so many people who tell me the stuff that I'm getting from you is the opposite of every other person I'm getting on my feed.
Which that's an example of you breaking through, though. That's exciting.
So, but I wish I was more the rule and not the exception. So, I think you can have an impact. Again, it's just about making the choice to I'm not going to play this polarization game. I'm not going to just preach to the choir so I can get likes and feel good and massage my ego. I'm going to actually have a mission here and try to accomplish it in a logical way, which is, I need to talk to everybody and be inclusive.
Right. And it also reminds me of what you're bringing up. One of my pet peeves, I shouldn't say pet peeves, but I'll use that language, pet peeves, is people at each other's throats, certainly American Jews, and then about Israel's policies. Because I think Tal Becker, the famous thinker and negotiator with the Palestinians, always says, just so you know, the Israeli peace process will not be solved in a living room in Boca Raton, just as a reminder. And we have this element of people are so intense about it. By the way, the presidential election is an even more, in some ways, ridiculous example, because you have people in states where the chances of that state changing are non-existent. If you're not in one of the swing states.
I live in California, we're in New York, our votes don't matter at all.
So spending endless energy, effort, convincing, fighting, yelling. Listen, if you're going to go volunteer or you're posting on social trying to help, but this idea of you can't talk to this member of your family anymore because they disagree with you politically, it's there's no, your vote doesn't even have power here. You should vote. Everyone go vote. It's super important to vote, but there's no power there. So
it's not even just the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's any conflict is going to be solved by the people who have skin in that game, and never it's going to be solved by people who are totally outside of it. And usually it's the people outside of it who are making it harder for those people to solve that conflict because they are more rigid. There's an organization called Search for Common Ground that is on the ground in all these places around the world trying to do sort of conflict resolution with the real stakeholders. And they have the data that backs up what I just said, that people, the most inflexible when it comes to these conflicts are the people who are not involved and act much more as an impediment to this getting solved and aren't listening to the people who are actually in the conflict saying, okay, here are our issues, we just want to work them out. It's very annoying. And I just wish more people understood that again, the stakes are not as high for you, even though emotionally they might be high. Practically, again, it's talking about the perception versus reality. You are not going to impact this unless you are someone with a platform and you're speaking in a certain way. But regular living room chatter, let's just turn the temperature down.
It's hilarious. The stakes in how you have that conversation with your loved one and friends are much higher than what you say, right? Like if you're like how you behave in front of your children by talking to another adult, how you argue about these things like that, I feel like the stakes are super high to be thoughtful about, you know, your 4 C's and being calm and those types of things. Like there's so much impact to be had there, whereas like you nuancing exactly what the next move should be. Sinwar is gone. This is what Israel should do. Like, oh my God,
that's exactly
relax yourself. But it's very hard. And the credit to you that, you know, like I said, in this kind of, let's call it garbage storm of misinformation, for lack of a better term, you're trying to like be that one person in someone's feed. That's totally different. That's like, okay, well, I'm seeing X all day, and then at least I see the Jonah thing, which at least brings me back to reality. It's an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle, but and also not taking the bait and saying, okay, I want to say something that's super controversial and extreme to try to get likes, but more, I'm gonna actually say something that's like genuine and authentic and reflects who I am and gets at the middle a little bit, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you know, a phrase I've said so much in the past couple months that I haven't had to say a lot is like, these are not life and death stakes. I've had to say that a lot of times where people are geared up as if they're in the fight of their lives.
And there are actual people in the fight of their lives in Israel right now who are like in bunkers and risking their lives and families at home. And your opinion on...
And I don't mean to diminish, you know, the very real challenges we're facing and the way they can impact our lives, but just, as you said, like this one conversation between me and my uncle is not going to solve the Middle East crisis. So let's honor that relationship first, and then we can talk about whatever. Right,
beautiful. All right, so that brings me back to, I wanted to ask you about this as well, kind of as we think about, you know, I think another thing that creates a lot of arguing online is Hollywood representation and there's two different things. One is, are Jews playing Jewish parts, which I've heard you talk about before, which I don't think about on a regular basis, but certainly how Jews are portrayed in Jewish content in general. You know, I'm located in a modern Orthodox world, and we are like literally nowhere to be seen in that world, right? It's always like Haredi Jews, or it's like, you know, liberal Jews, and this idea of like this like sliver of people who like, you know, have regular jobs and take their, you know, halakha very intensely. We're nowhere, which I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. But I think kind of one show I've heard you talk about as being a little bit of a positive example is Nobody Wants This, that just came out, which you had an amazing interview about it. I don't want to go so deep into it, but I want to ask you, I have a follow-up question, but I'll let you say first, just kind of like what speaks to you about that show, and then I'll ask my question.
As I said on the pod, like it's everything I really have been looking for in Jewish representation. It's a love letter to Judaism. The Jewish characters, most of them are being played by Jews. The key ones certainly are. It is educational about the Jewish experience. It's contemporary, so it's not people praying, you know, in a concentration camp. It's like people going in 2024 to their shul. And you get to humanize Jews for all these millions of people around the world who don't know what Jews are. And their only frame of reference, again, is like what they see on the news. Okay, Jews are bombing Palestinians, and Jews are Haredim with the curls, and or they're like rich white people. It's like, that's the only touchstones. So then you get a show like this where you're like, oh, there's like a hot rabbi. Oh, they're doing Havdalah. Oh, they're talking about Shabbat. They're at shul on a Friday night. I mean, I loved seeing that. And one of the things I really loved, and I mentioned this, is, you know, they're in the car in one episode, and she goes, "I didn't think you looked Jewish." And he's like, "Well, what does that mean that I don't look Jewish? Is my nose not big enough? Is my hair not curly?" And he's saying it with a smile, and I love that whole moment because it's so real. It is so the kind of conversations we're having. And you could tell like with his levity, like it's one he's had before. This isn't his first time. He's got a good perspective on it. He's making a joke about it, but it's, you know, he's saying something real. And you don't
also models how to navigate those situations. Not like, I'm going to post online now that you said this and we're going to cancel your show. Right.
Exactly. And like to see that on a #1 Netflix show was like such a gift. I think that's exactly the kind of thing that as a Jewish community we should be wanting and pushing for and grateful exists.
Right. So first of all, let's touch on that for a second. I feel like some of the shows, I remember someone saying Netflix can be successful because there's niche markets. So like if they have a show that only Orthodox Jews are going to watch, they're fine because every single one of them is going to watch it, and that's how they move on. But this show is different. This show is like Jewish theme. It's the number one show on Netflix. What do you think's going on there? Like, who's watching this show? Are people what's the deal?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things.
Yeah.
One is, look, I mean, it's Kristen Bell and Adam Brody, so they cast it great. It's a great show. Like, take all the Jewish out of it. It's like a great romantic story. The obstacles are really interesting. It's not a story you've seen before. The two of them are so charming together. It's like you can't take your eyes off of their connection. And everything is organic. It's like everything about that story made sense, came from the narrative. There was nothing, it was just really well written, really well executed.
So you're saying
it appeals to you on a human storytelling
level. Like the Jewish part was kind of like the costume design,
yes.
But behind it was just an excellent, let's call it romantic comedy.
And that's the key. And like that is that's like the key piece of the kind of Jewish content I want to see. And if you want anyone outside of the Jewish community to see it, it has to just be a great narrative on its own merits first, and an entertaining piece of content, and then the delivery method is the Jewish experience. That's like such a win if you can get all that.
Beautiful. By the way, that brings me back to Penn also. I remember I was a communications major there, and I remember learning there about the jazz singer with Al Jolson, right? So this was, I think, the first talkie, as it was called.
That's right.
Wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet. Wait a minute, I tell you, you ain't heard nothing.
I always tell kids, this is one of my favorite facts when they're watching movies, that the first movie with talking in it is about a guy deciding whether or not he should perform on Broadway or be the cantor, I think, at Yom Kippur services.
Right.
Like, bizarre. That's like the most Jewish story. But I think same thing. It was, I imagine it wasn't, everyone in the country didn't rally around it because of the cantor question. It was more, this is a question around like, okay, how do you navigate tradition and innovation? And like, do I do what my parents have taught me, or do I follow my dreams? And how do you do that?
I'll give you a great example. Fiddler on the Roof. It's like one of the most performed shows in the world. There's a great documentary about it. You see like a Japanese company putting it on because the themes of that story speak to so many cultures and people. That's why it's been going for decades, this show, because it's about family, it's about tradition, it's about parenthood, it's about trying to hold on to your traditions, and that speaks to everybody. When it's universal like that, it's gold.
Beautiful. So what I hear you saying, which makes so much sense, is first do the tight part first. Do the excellent story and the excellent, people who are at home making their movies or making their shows, focus on it being excellent in the first place, and then if it makes sense for it to be dressed in Judaism.
You have to do a little of them at the same time, but yes.
But I think shows that do well also, the drapes match the curtains, or whatever you call it, right? There's some element of like, you have a theme that makes sense, and then housing that theme in this culture, it needs to happen in the Midwest, it needs to happen in the woods, it needs to happen in a city, because that's the theme at play. That's beautiful. I'll say for me, kind of two things that stand out. You mentioned the Havdalah, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah.
So I felt like instead of also just kind of going through the motions, it represented like what a liberal rabbi should be doing, which is like, and all rabbis really, which is like, using the halakha to have inspiring, powerful moments. And he has this moment where it's not him like inside saying blessings with a candle and the grape juice and the spices, which we do in our home every week. It's him saying, this is so romantic. I'm gonna go outside. We're gonna wait for 3 stars to come out, and then we're gonna say Havdalah's over, which we, like this past week, my daughter had 2 friends over, and we were playing code names, and I was like, why don't we play on the front porch, watch the sunset? And they were like, when does Shabbat ends? I was like, guys, let's see when we see 3 stars. And we had this whole
experience. Were you inspired by the show?
100%.
Oh, I love that.
Pulled out of the show. I was just like, I'm like a rabbi who's, also trying to be a Jewish inspirer at home for sure. And I was like, that's a cool move, man. Like we copy the moves to pick up the girl on the show, but also copying the moves for how to do Judaism meaningfully in the show. So I love that. That was a great innovation. I don't know who wrote that in, but it was great. I think you mentioned a couple of qualms on your show. My qualm, which I don't know if it came up in your interview, and I know like my extended family was really thinking about this, was the moment where the rabbi's mother eats the ham, right? So there's this moment where they're at a family dinner, and she kind of like, Kristen Bell's character brings ham to the meal, and they're like, we have to throw this out, and then she's sneaking eating it. That to me felt like
that was the only outlier
in the whole show.
In the whole show, which is why I sort of let it go.
Right.
We got 99% of it, but that the goy bringing pork and then the mom eating the pork. That little thing was like the stickiest, sort of least organic
They
part
needed, I
of
assume,
it.
for the plot. They needed a way for her to.
They needed some secret between them,
Yes,
so that,
exactly.
that she would have the upper hand on her. So like you get so you get why it's there as a plot device, but you're right to point out that that was the one thing that I felt like was a little jammed in there.
Right, it was like, I don't see that happening, especially, again, not to make gross generalizations, but she has an accent, we don't get the background, but I think the assumption is that there's some, I grew up around.
She's from the old country.
Right, and they're coming with tradition and kind of that idea. It felt like, that's not, no, come on.
Didn't really track.
And don't make it like we have no self-control.
Right.
But like, you're committed to some sort of way of living for, 90 years of your life, and then you see a bit of ham, and it's like, it's never been in my kitchen before, I need to eat it.
Right.
Which again, is not to say that all Jews aren't eating ham, but it was more, to me, it wasn't about the ham, it was more about how we approach our Jewish way of living, that people don't throw it out the window because there's some element of temptation for 1 second, and then like, especially when their son's marriage is at stake and all those kind of things, it's felt like, let's not.
I hear all that, and I can assure you when they were writing it, like, it wasn't that deep for them.
Yeah.
They didn't even, they didn't think about that at all. They were like, we gotta have a thing, let's have her eat the it'll be funny, boom, let's move on.
Move on, exactly. And I think that's also, and to their credit, again, this feels like the exception. There are other things that I saw people posting, like, can't watch it because of that. I'm like, everyone, relax yourself. We've had much worse. This seems like a step in the right direction.
Totally agree.
Yes, I'd love for the next one to be, a modern Orthodox setting. Maybe it's at a Seder or something like that.
Yeah.
We'll write that one day.
I hope so. That'd be nice.
Yeah, so tell me a word about the movie you're producing starring Ginnifer Goodwin.
Yeah, The Mensch.
Yeah.
So hopefully in its execution, it's going to be what I've sort of just described, a really entertaining movie on its own merits with unique, contemporary, flawed characters who happen to be Jewish. The main character is a rabbi at a conservative shul. And everything that sort of snowballs out of that, there's a lot of Jewish stuff baked in. The characters are Jewish. They're being played by Jewish. It's written and directed by a Jew, which is super important to us. But it's going to be like a fun, romp, thrilling, funny whole shebang. And like, if that part isn't there, then the movie is a failure.
Right.
And I hope that the rest of it will come because we have a great story to tell, which I know we do. I love this story.
Beautiful. All right, we're excited to see it. Is there a timeline for that yet? Or
we start shooting early 2025.
Amazing. All right, it should be blessed. It should go well, and it should have a similar effect that people are able to see an amazing movie and through the lens of the Jewish world.
That's the hope.
We love it. All right, that's beautiful. Tell me, over the next couple of months, who are some guests you're excited about having on?
I got a lot of fun guests coming on. I'm really excited to have to sit with Richie Torres, who one of our non-Jewish allies, one of like the great political non-Jewish allies, who is such a smart, interesting guy,
and a friend of JBS as well.
I'm sure of that.
Yeah.
I am going to be having Patricia Heaton. That's another non-Jewish ally who I'm really excited about, who's coming on.
She's from Everyone Loves Raymond,
right? And she has been an unbelievable support in this last year. I mean, she's like started a whole nonprofit around it. I mean, she's been.
I have some friends involved with that. I've heard great things.
Yeah, so she's been amazing. And then who else do I have coming up? Sarah Hurwitz. The author.
She's a friend of mine as well. It's the crew.
Yeah. And for so long, people have been like, you don't know Sarah Hurwitz? So like, I'm glad I'm finally going to get to meet her. We're going to get to sit down and chat. I just shot Gail Simmons the other day, who was so lovely, and like, I'm such a big Top Chef fan. And her Jewish upbringing was so similar to mine. It was really interesting to hear that and see all of our parallels. Here's one I'm excited about. There are 3 siblings who are Latino Jews who all work in Arizona politics. All 3 of them successfully, a brother and 2 sisters. I'm friends with all 3 of them. I'm going to have all 3 of them on together, the Hernandez siblings. So I'm psyched for that one.
Oh my God, amazing. All right, I'm very excited to see those for sure. A couple of hot questions. Wicked, the movie, is coming out.
Oh yeah.
My children are of age where they have not seen the Broadway musical yet. I've been kind of waiting for them because I want to make sure they're old enough to get it. We've had this before. We had like Aladdin, the original cartoon, Aladdin, the live action movie, Aladdin, the theater production. How do you think about navigating the art? I guess we have it with Star Wars also. We have the prequels that go with the regular shows.
Yeah.
How do you think about, someone wants to introduce their family to Wicked? What do you think?
That's a great question. I mean, we don't really know the answer, right? We have to see how it plays out. And what's interesting with, like you mentioned, Aladdin, like, I'm sure the musical is lovely, but the movie is like so terrific and such an icon. And as successful as the musical was, it was not that level of iconic.
Right.
Both this movie and this play of Wicked are iconic. So and I've seen the movie. It's fantastic. And just such a cool realization of that world. But the stage show also creates that world so well. And the story, again, it's the story first.
Right.
Story and character first. And it's the same story and character. And it's so like bulletproof, that story. There's a reason it's been on Broadway for 20 years, because it speaks to everybody. So I really think you can't go wrong. And then we'll see how it proves out. So if it's like easier to have your kids see the movie first, watch the movie first.
Stakes,
and then
if they're scared, they can run out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, although it's probably... I wonder what's scarier, like seeing a CGI flying monkey or seeing an actor in a flying monkey suit flying around a theater.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. My cousin Mark and I were flying monkeys in Camp Starlight. It was before Wicked, it was for Wizard of Oz. They just had us roller skate around the stage.
That's not a big budget in the camp plays.
I was in theater at one point
I
as
love
well.
that.
That's great. Another thing that I'm curious to ask you while you're on that point is, I mentioned at the beginning that your sister Samantha had like the CD of Wicked before it came out. It was literally like, when CDs were, you could write.
Burned it.
It was burned. It was burned with
Sharpie,
the name in the car with a Sharpie.
Remember burning CDs?
Oh my God, those are the days. But one of the things that's really changed in theater is that now people like know the whole soundtrack before they walk in. I think that like Hamilton, I think, was like the first explosion of that. I think Wicked as well, but Hamilton, you had people who knew every single word to every single song before they stepped inside, and that to me was like, I'm still navigating how I feel about that. I'm curious how you do, which is like, is the goal like, you really shouldn't see a show until you know all the songs in advance, and like, it's really, you can kind of like get more out of it because you're singing along. Because I remember being a kid going to shows and being like, what was that song about? I got totally lost here. So is there like, it almost is like a question around Judaism as well, which is like, with around like tefillah almost, or prayer, which is like this idea of like, is it important that you know all the words and then you can really take advantage? Or is it more like, go experience this thing and you'll figure out what the words are later?
That's a great question.
How do you think about that? Yeah.
I think, look, there's value in both. I think if you never hear, but how many, brand new musicals come out every year, and if you're there opening night, you didn't hear the soundtrack hasn't been released yet. And you can still have a wonderful experience and enjoy the show immensely. But like, as soon as you said that, I thought of the first show that I can remember hearing and like knowing every note of way before I saw it was Rent.
I knew you were going to say Rent. I knew you were going to say Rent.
Because, when that came out, I don't remember when it came out. It was maybe 8, 10, something like that. Like, my parents weren't rushing to take me to New York to go see Rent. But the music was, so... groundbreaking and so fantastic. And my dad, I remember listening in his car, was so excited to share it with us. And of course we loved it. And actually, I love the experience of listening to Rent more than I like seeing it in a theater. As a show, it sort of doesn't always totally hold together for me, but the music is what it's all about. And I can get that experience for that particular musical, on my headphones.
Beautiful.
So really, you can't go wrong.
Beautiful, I love it. I'm noticing a pattern here, which is that you're able to articulate both sides of every question.
I can't help it.
Could have been a lawyer in a different version of this. That's great. What is it, 525,600 minutes?
Exactly right.
It sticks with you. Okay, great. So speaking of minutes, we are out of time. I just want to say thank you so much, Jonah. We are beyond excited to be airing your show Thursday nights. You're LA based, so we got the,
I love
8
it.
p.m.,
Everybody's
11 p.m.
included.
And it repeats,
we got both
everyone
sides.
can watch. It's on at 8 and 11 for everyone. You can listen anywhere where you get your podcast.
Yep, Apple,
YouTube.
Spotify, whatever. You can watch us on YouTube. We got our channel.
It's
at Jonah Platt Official.
And I hope it should continue to go well. We're excited to hear about the movie when it comes out. Folks, tune in Thursday nights. You can see Jonah right here on JBS. And Jonah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's been really fun.
All right.